Ruth Ellen counted. 17 steps from the holding pen to the auction block. 43 men in the crowd. 2 babies fighting to be born inside her belly. She'd learned years ago that counting kept her sane when everything else tried to break her. But tonight, as the chains bit into her wrists and the first contraction ripped through her body, she lost count for the first time in 10 years. Stay with this story until the very end, and comment your city below so I can see how far Ruth's journey travels. And if her story touches your heart, subscribe to follow her path to freedom. Ruth Ellen Calloway had stopped screaming 6 years ago. She'd learned that screaming only made them hit harder. Crying made them laugh. Begging made them cruel. So she'd taught herself to go somewhere else inside her head, somewhere quiet, somewhere they couldn't reach. And she counted. Right now, she was counting the women in the holding pen with her. 7. All of them broken in different ways. The young one in the corner hadn't stopped shaking since they'd brought her in 3 days ago. The older woman by the water trough had eyes like a dead fish. Empty. Gone. Ruth understood. She'd been both of those women once. You. The guard's voice cut through the bitter cold. Lot number 12. You're up. Ruth didn't move. Not because she was defying him. Her body simply wouldn't cooperate. The pain had started 2 hours ago. Deep, wrenching waves that told her the babies were coming whether she was ready or not. Babies. Plural. She'd known for months there were 2 of them. Could feel them shifting and fighting for space inside her swollen belly. 2 lives she hadn't asked for, hadn't wanted, couldn't protect. I said move, girl. Can't. Ruth's voice came out flat, emotionless. Babies are coming. The guard laughed. Actually laughed. Well, ain't that perfect timing? Fresh breeder with proof of fertility. You're gonna fetch a pretty penny tonight. He grabbed her arm and hauled her upright. Ruth's legs buckled, but he didn't slow down. He dragged her through the mud past the horse stalls toward the raised platform, where torches flickered against the December darkness. She counted the steps. 17. Same as always. The auctioneer was a wiry man with tobacco-stained teeth and eyes that had stopped seeing humans a long time ago. He looked Ruth up and down like she was livestock. Well, well, what do we have here? Lot 12, sir. Calloway stock. 10 years in service, no escape attempts in the last 4. That was a lie. Ruth had tried to run 3 times. They'd caught her every time. The scars on her back told that story better than words ever could. And she's... The auctioneer's gaze dropped to her belly. His smile widened. Oh, this is good. This is very good. Gentlemen are gonna love this. Another contraction hit. Ruth's knees buckled, but she caught herself on the platform railing. She wouldn't fall. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Get her up there, the auctioneer ordered. Let's give the boys a show. The platform was rough wood slick with frozen rain. Ruth climbed the steps one at a time, counting each one. 5 steps, 5 steps to hell. 53 men stood in the crowd below. She counted them twice to be sure. Ranchers in wool coats, miners with calloused hands, traders who bought and sold human beings like they were buying cattle, all of them calculating her worth, her usefulness, her price. Lot number 12, the auctioneer announced, his voice carrying over the bitter wind. Female, 24 years of age, strong Tennessee mountain stock, 10 years in service, and gentleman. He paused for effect. She's carrying twins. Due any day now. 3 for the price of 1. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Ruth's hands moved instinctively to her belly, but the chains stopped her halfway. She couldn't even cradle her own children. Starting bid, $100. 100. A voice from the left. 120. Another from the right. 150. The numbers climbed. Ruth watched the men raise their hands, watched them calculate her worth in dollars and labor. She counted the bids. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 men who wanted to own her. 6 men who would use her until she broke, then sell her again or worse. 180. Do I hear 190? The contraction that hit her then was the worst yet. Ruth couldn't stay standing. She dropped to her knees on the wooden platform, a cry escaping her lips, despite 10 years of practice staying silent. "Well now," the auctioneer said, delighted. "Looks like we might get a real show tonight, boys. Who wants to see some babies born?" More laughter. Someone whistled. Ruth's vision blurred. She could feel the babies pressing down, demanding to be born. Not here. God, please. Not here. 190. Anyone. Come on, gentlemen. 3 for the price of 1. You won't find a better deal this side of the Mississippi. 200. The voice came from the back of the crowd. Quiet, but somehow cutting through the noise like a knife through butter. The laughter stopped. Ruth lifted her head, trying to see who had spoken. The torchlight didn't reach that far. All she could make out was a silhouette. Tall, broad-shouldered, still as stone. 200 from the gentleman in the back, the auctioneer said, surprise evident in his voice. Do I hear 220? Silence. Ruth counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 200 going once. 6, 7, 8. Going twice. 9, 10. The gavel cracked against wood. Sold to the gentleman in the back. Lot 12 and her offspring. 3 souls for $200. 3 souls. Ruth had never heard anyone at an auction use that word before. Souls. Like they were people. Like they mattered. The guard hauled her off the platform and toward the payment table. Her bare feet slipped in the frozen mud, her body screaming with each step. Another contraction hit, and this time, Ruth couldn't hold back the gasp of pain. Here's your merchandise, sir. The guard shoved her forward. Ruth stumbled, falling to her knees in the mud at the buyer's feet. She stayed there for a moment, trying to catch her breath, trying to count something, anything to keep herself anchored. Then she looked up. The man was older than the voice had suggested. Mid-30s, maybe. Weathered face like he'd spent his whole life outdoors. Dark hair going gray at the temples. And eyes. Pale gray eyes that looked at her not like property, not like merchandise. Like a person. Can you stand, ma'am? Ma'am. Ruth stared at him. No one had called her that in 10 years, maybe ever. I don't know, she heard herself say. He nodded like that was a perfectly reasonable answer. That's all right. Take your time. Take your time. Like she had any time to take. Like the babies weren't coming whether she was ready or not. Sir? The clerk's voice was impatient. I need payment. The stranger turned, and Ruth watched him count out bills with deliberate slowness. 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. She counted with him. 120, 140, 160, 180, 200. $200. That was her price. Her and 2 unborn children. I need papers for all 3, the stranger said. The woman and both babies. Babies ain't born yet, sir. Can't write papers for. Then write and any offspring on the bill of sale. Make it legal. The clerk shrugged and did as he was told. Ruth watched the transaction with detached fascination. This was her life being traded. Her children's lives, and she had no say in any of it. Here's your papers, sir. She's all yours. All yours, like she was a horse, a cow, a piece of furniture. The stranger tucked the papers into his coat and turned back to Ruth. She was still on her knees in the mud, still trying to catch her breath between contractions. Ma'am. He held out his hand. My wagon's at the edge of the yard. Can you walk that far? Ruth looked at his hand. Large, calloused, steady. The hand of a man who worked for a living. She didn't take it. Smart, he said without anger. You don't know me yet. Yet. Like there would be a future. Like she would survive this night. What's your name? Ruth asked. Her voice came out rusty, like she'd forgotten how to use it. Elijah Brooks. Most folks call me Eli. Eli. She tested it. Simple. Ordinary. "Why did you buy me?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That's a long answer, ma'am. And right now you need to get out of this cold and somewhere safe to have those babies." Safe. Ruth almost laughed. She hadn't been safe in 10 years. She'd forgotten what the word even meant. But she let him help her up. Not because she trusted him, because she had no choice. Because the babies were coming and she couldn't deliver them alone in the mud behind an auction house. His grip was firm but gentle. He didn't squeeze too hard. Didn't yank her up like the guards always did. Just steady pressure helping her find her balance. "The chains," she said, holding up her wrists. Eli turned to the guard who was still standing nearby, watching the exchange with barely concealed contempt. "Key." "Sir, I don't have authorization to—" "She's my property now." Eli's voice went cold, hard, dangerous. "That's all the authorization you need. Key, now." Something in his tone made the guard reconsider. He unlocked the shackles without another word, and Ruth's hands were free for the first time in 3 days. She touched her belly, immediately cradling it, feeling the babies shift and press. They were restless, eager, ready to meet a world that didn't want them. "This way." Eli gestured toward the edge of the yard. "Wagon's got a canvas cover. Should keep out the worst of the cold." Ruth followed him. She didn't know why. Instinct, maybe. Exhaustion. Or just the simple fact that following was all she'd ever been allowed to do. They walked past men leading their purchases away, past women crying, and children screaming. Ruth counted the faces. 12 women, 8 children. All of them sold tonight. All of them property now. She used to wonder if she'd go to hell for surviving this life. Now she knew. She was already there. The wagon was simple but sturdy. A canvas cover stretched over the bed, creating a sheltered space inside. Eli helped her up, offered his hand again, and this time Ruth took it because her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. She collapsed onto the blankets inside, and another contraction ripped through her body. "Don't leave yet." The words came out before she could stop them. "The babies. They're coming now." Eli's expression didn't change. He climbed into the wagon bed, pushed back the canvas to let in more light. "Tell me what you need." "Water, clean cloth, something to bite down on." He moved fast, efficient. Canteen of water from his saddlebag, a shirt clean and worn soft, a leather belt doubled over. Ruth took the belt between her teeth and bore down. The next hour was a blur of pain and counting. She counted the seconds between contractions, counted her breaths, counted Eli's quiet words of encouragement. "You're doing fine. Not long now. I've got you, ma'am." He didn't try to touch her more than necessary, didn't ask questions, just did what needed to be done with the calm efficiency of a man who'd helped deliver foals and calves his whole life. The first baby came with a rush of blood and a scream that split the night. "It's a girl." Eli's voice was soft. "She's got strong lungs." Ruth couldn't respond. The second baby was already demanding to be born. 3 contractions later, another cry filled the wagon. "Another girl." Eli wrapped the second baby in his spare shirt and laid her next to her sister. Twins. Both healthy. Both perfect. Ruth lay there panting, bleeding, more exhausted than she'd ever been in her life. She could hear her daughters crying, demanding attention, demanding food, demanding love. She didn't know if she had any of those things to give. "You need to hold them," Eli said gently. "They need their mother." "I can't." Ruth's voice cracked. "I can't." "Why not?" "Because if I hold them, I'll love them. And if I love them, losing them will destroy me." She didn't say that. She couldn't say that. But somehow Eli seemed to understand. "They're yours," he said quietly. "Those papers might say I own you, but I don't believe in owning people. You're their mother. They need you." He placed the babies on Ruth's chest one at a time, careful and gentle. The crying softened as the twins found their mother's warmth, their tiny fists curling against her skin. Ruth looked down at them. 2 faces, 2 lives, 2 souls, the auctioneer had said. She started counting again. 10 fingers on baby 1, 10 fingers on baby 2. 10 toes. 10 toes. 2 heartbeats against her chest. 1, 2. 1, 2. And somewhere in the counting, something cracked inside her. Something she'd sealed shut 10 years ago when she learned that hope was dangerous and love was a weapon others used against you. She felt tears streaming down her face. First tears in 6 years. "They're beautiful," Eli said softly. Ruth looked up at him. This stranger who had bought her for $200 and helped her give birth in the back of a wagon on the coldest night of the year. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you do this?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because nobody should give birth in chains. And because—" He hesitated. "Because I had a sister once. They took her when she was 15. I looked for her for years. Never found her." Ruth's throat tightened. "I don't know if she's alive or dead," Eli continued. "Don't know what happened to her, but I know what I wish someone had done for her." He met her eyes, and Ruth saw something there she hadn't seen in a decade. Pain, yes. Old pain. But also something else. Kindness. "My ranch is about 4 days from here. Wyoming territory. You'll have food shelter time to heal. After that—" He shrugged. "Your choice." "My choice." Ruth almost laughed. "I don't get choices. I'm property. Those papers say so." "Papers say a lot of things, ma'am. Doesn't make them true." The babies were rooting against Ruth's chest, hungry and insistent. She shifted them awkwardly, not knowing how to nurse 2 at once, not knowing how to do any of this. "First time?" Eli asked. "No." Ruth's voice went flat. "I had a baby before. 6 years ago. They took her from me when she was 3 days old. Sold her to someone in Louisiana." The words hung in the cold air. Eli didn't say he was sorry, didn't offer empty comfort. He just nodded once, like he understood that some wounds couldn't be healed with words. "These 2, he said quietly. "Nobody's taking them. Not while I'm breathing." Ruth wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. But she'd learned a long time ago that wanting and having were 2 different things. "I don't trust you," she said. "I know. I don't trust anyone." "I know that too." "Then why—" She gestured at the wagon, the blankets, the babies in her arms. "Why all this?" Eli picked up the reins and clicked his tongue at the horses. The wagon lurched forward, leaving the auction yard behind. "Because trust has to start somewhere," he said over his shoulder. "And I figure actions speak louder than words, so I'll show you who I am, day by day, and you can decide for yourself whether to believe it." Ruth held her daughters close and watched the torches of the auction yard fade into the darkness. She started counting again. 1 mile. 2 miles. 3. Each mile putting distance between her and that terrible place. The babies had stopped crying. They were sleeping now, exhausted from the ordeal of being born. Ruth studied their faces in the dim moonlight. They looked alike, but not identical. One had a tiny birthmark near her left eye. The other had a slightly pointed chin. "They need names," she said quietly. Eli glanced back. "What do you want to call them?" "My choice." There it was again. Like her opinion mattered. Like she was allowed to decide things. Ruth thought about it. She thought about her mother dead 15 years now. About the grandmother she'd never met. About all the names that had been taken from her, replaced with numbers and lot designations. "Mercy," she said, finally touching the baby with the birthmark. "And Grace." "Mercy and Grace." Eli nodded slowly. "Those are good names. My mother used to say those were the 2 things everyone deserved. Mercy when we fail. Grace when we don't deserve it." "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "She was." Ruth's voice caught. "She was the one who taught me to read." Eli turned, slightly surprised flickering across his weathered face. "You can read?" Ruth tensed. She'd said too much. Reading was dangerous for someone like her. It gave her ideas. made her harder to control. The scar on her left arm throbbed with the memory of what happened when they caught her trying to write a letter. "Forget I said that," she muttered. "No." Eli's voice was firm. That's something to be proud of, not something to hide." Ruth didn't respond. She'd learned a long time ago that pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. The wagon rolled on through the frozen darkness. Ruth counted the stars through the gap in the canvas. 23 visible. 23 points of light in a sky full of darkness. She'd survived another day. Her daughters had been born alive. A stranger had bought her freedom, or at least bought her. It wasn't hope. Not yet. Hope was too dangerous. But it was something. Mercy stirred against her chest, making small, hungry sounds. Ruth shifted her, guided her to nurse, marveled at how the baby knew exactly what to do, even though neither of them had done this before. "There's a town about half a day's ride from here," Eli said. "Small place called Miller's Crossing. We can stop there, get you some proper clothes, food for the journey. People will ask questions. Let them ask. I'll tell them you're my wife's cousin, come to help on the ranch. You have a wife." Had. Eli's voice went quiet. "She died 5 years ago. Cholera took her and our son both." Ruth didn't say she was sorry. He hadn't said it to her. Somehow the silence felt more honest than empty words. "So you live alone," she said. "Have for 5 years now. On a ranch. Horse ranch mostly. I breed them, train them, sell them to the cavalry sometimes." "And you just decided to go to an auction and buy a pregnant woman?" Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I didn't plan to. I was in San Antonio selling horses, heard about the auction, told myself I wouldn't go, told myself it wasn't my business." "But you went anyway." "Yeah, I went anyway." He sighed. "Stood in the back of that crowd watching them sell people like they were cattle, telling myself there was nothing I could do. One man can't change the world." "So what changed?" "You." Ruth's heart stuttered. "You came up on that platform," Eli continued, "and you weren't crying, weren't screaming. You were just still. Like you'd gone somewhere inside yourself where they couldn't touch you. And then you fell to your knees, and I saw you put your hands on your belly, trying to protect those babies, even though you couldn't even reach them because of the chains." He turned to look at her, and in the moonlight, his gray eyes were bright with something Ruth couldn't name. "I thought about my sister. Thought about what I wished someone had done for her. And before I knew what I was doing, I was bidding $200 I couldn't really afford." Ruth didn't know what to say. She held her daughters closer and counted the beats of her heart. 1, 2, 3, 4. "I'm not a good man," Eli said quietly. "Done things in the war I'm not proud of. Lost people I should have saved. Failed more times than I can count." "Then why?" "Because sometimes doing one right thing is all you've got." He turned back to face the road. "Doesn't erase the wrong. Doesn't make you a hero. But it's something." The wagon rolled on. Ruth watched the stars wheel overhead and counted the miles as they passed. At some point, exhaustion won. She fell asleep with her daughters warm against her chest and a stranger's words echoing in her mind. Doing one right thing is all you've got. She'd spent 10 years surviving, counting days, counting beatings, counting the pieces of herself that broke off and blew away. Maybe it was time to count something else. Ruth woke to gray dawn and the smell of coffee. For a disoriented moment, she didn't know where she was. Her body ached in unfamiliar ways. There was weight on her chest, movement. Then memory flooded back. The auction, the stranger, the birth, the babies. She sat up too fast, panic shooting through her. But Mercy and Grace were still there, still breathing, still perfect. They'd slept through the night somehow. Or maybe she'd fed them without remembering. "Morning," Eli's voice came from somewhere nearby. How do you feel? Ruth took stock. She was sore everywhere, bleeding still, exhausted down to her bones, but alive, free, or at least freer than she'd been yesterday. Better than I should, she admitted. There's coffee if you want it. Water too. And some bread from yesterday. Ruth climbed carefully out of the wagon bed, keeping the babies wrapped tight against her. Eli was crouched by a small fire, feeding it sticks to keep it alive against the morning cold. He didn't look at her when she approached, just poured coffee into a tin cup and held it out. Ruth took it. The warmth seeped into her frozen fingers. We should reach Miller's Crossing by midday, Eli said. Get you some real food. Maybe a hot bath if they've got one. A bath. Ruth couldn't remember the last time she'd had a real bath. Years, probably. They'd given the workers a trough and cold water once a week if they were lucky. People will talk, she said. Let them. A man traveling with a woman and newborn twins. They'll think, I don't much care what they think. Eli finally looked at her. Do you? Ruth considered the question. Did she care? She'd spent 10 years caring what other people thought, caring about rules and expectations and staying invisible. No, she said finally. I don't. Eli nodded like that was exactly the answer he'd expected. They broke camp and continued north. Ruth sat in the back of the wagon with the babies, counting the miles as they passed. 5, 10, 15. Each one taking her farther from the auction yard, farther from everything she'd known. Miller's Crossing was barely a town. A single main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, and a handful of houses clustered together against the cold. Eli pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the general store. Stay here, he said. I'll get what we need. Ruth watched him go. She could run right now. Take the babies and disappear while he was inside. Find somewhere to hide, somewhere to survive. But where would she go? She had no money, no papers, 2 newborn babies who needed feeding every few hours. She'd freeze to death before nightfall. So she stayed. Not because she trusted him, because she had no choice. Eli emerged 20 minutes later with an armful of supplies. Blankets, a heavy wool dress, baby clothes soft and clean. Food that didn't look like the scraps she'd been fed for years. Here. He handed her the dress. Mrs. Patterson at the store said it should fit. You can change inside the wagon. Ruth took the dress. It was blue, simple, beautiful. Thank you, she said. You can stop thanking me. Why? Because you don't owe me anything. Eli loaded the supplies into the wagon. Everything I'm giving you, you earned the moment you survived what they did to you. Consider it. Back pay. Ruth didn't know how to respond to that. She retreated into the wagon and changed out of her blood-stained rags, careful not to wake the sleeping babies. The dress fit. The fabric was soft against her skin, softer than anything she'd worn in years. She looked down at herself and felt something strange. Something she couldn't quite name. Then she realized what it was. She looked like a person. Not property, not a lot number. A person. Ready? Eli's voice came from outside. Ruth pulled back the canvas and climbed onto the wagon seat next to him. He glanced at her and something flickered across his face. Approval, maybe, or just acknowledgement. Mrs. Patterson's daughter had twins last year, he said. She gave me some advice. Said the first few weeks are the hardest. After that, it gets easier. Does it? I don't know. I've never had twins. He clicked his tongue at the horses. But I figure we'll learn together. We. Like they were a team. Like her survival was his concern. Ruth counted the buildings as they left Miller's Crossing behind. General store. Saloon. Church. Blacksmith. 5 buildings. 5 steps back into the wilderness. 3 more days to Wyoming. 3 more days to find out if Eli Brooks was everything he seemed to be, or if he was just another wolf in sheep's clothing waiting for the right moment to show his teeth. Ruth held her daughters close and watched the road stretch out ahead of them. She'd survived 10 years by trusting no one, by expecting the worst, by counting the days until something terrible happened. But for the first time in a decade, she found herself counting something else, the miles between her and her past, and wondering if maybe, just maybe, there was something worth counting ahead. The 4th day on the road broke Ruth's counting. She'd been tracking everything. Miles traveled, hours slept, times Eli looked at her, times he didn't. She'd counted every interaction, every word, every gesture, filing them away like evidence she might need later. But on the 4th day, Grace got sick. It started with a cough. Small at first, then deeper. By midday, the baby was burning with fever, her tiny body trembling against Ruth's chest. "Something's wrong." Ruth's voice came out sharp-edged with panic she couldn't control. "She's too hot. She won't eat." Eli pulled the wagon to a stop immediately. He climbed into the back and pressed his hand to Grace's forehead, his weathered face going tight. "Fever's high." "I know that." Ruth heard the fear in her own voice and hated it. "What do we do?" "There's a woman. Lives about 2 hours east of here, Comanche. She knows healing better than any doctor I've ever met." "Comanche." Ruth's arms tightened around her daughters. "You want to take my baby to—" "Morning Star saved my life 3 years ago." Eli's gray eyes met hers steadily. "Snake bite. Doctor in town said I'd lose my arm. She said different. I've still got both arms." Ruth looked down at Grace. The baby's breathing was shallow, labored. Mercy was crying now, too upset by her sister's distress. "How far?" 2 hours. Maybe less if I push the horses." 2 hours. Grace might not have 2 hours. "Go." The word tore out of Ruth's throat. "Go now." Eli didn't hesitate. He jumped back onto the driver's seat and whipped the horses into motion. The wagon lurched forward, rattling over frozen ground. Ruth held her daughters and counted Grace's breaths. 1, 2, 3. Each one weaker than the last. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Stay with me, baby girl. Don't you leave me. Don't you dare." The next 2 hours were the longest of Ruth's life. Longer than the auction. Longer than labor. Longer than the years of captivity that had stolen everything from her. She talked to Grace the whole time. Told her about the grandmother she'd never meet. Sang songs her mother had sung, songs she'd forgotten she knew. Made promises she had no way of keeping. "I'll protect you. I'll keep you safe. Just hold on. Just a little longer." Eli drove like the devil himself, was chasing them. Ruth could hear him talking to the horses, pushing them harder than he should. Come on, almost there." Then the wagon stopped. "We're here." Eli was at her side before Ruth could move. "Give her to me. I'll carry her." Ruth's arms locked around Grace. Every instinct screamed at her to hold on, to never let go. "Ruth." Eli's voice was gentle, but firm. "I know you don't trust me, but right now your daughter needs help I can't give. Morning Star can. Please." "Please." He said, "Please," like her permission mattered, like her choice meant something. Ruth transferred Grace into his arms. Eli moved fast, carrying the baby toward a small structure Ruth could barely see through her tear-blurred vision. She scrambled out of the wagon with Mercy still pressed to her chest and followed. A woman emerged before they reached the door. Tall, dark-haired, with eyes that seemed to see everything and judge nothing. "Eli Brooks." Her voice was calm, unhurried. "You bring trouble to my door." "The baby's sick. Fever. Started this morning." Morning Star's gaze moved from Eli to Ruth to the bundle in his arms. She reached out and touched Grace's forehead with fingers that moved like water. "Inside, quickly." Ruth followed them through the door. She didn't care where she was or who this woman was or what might happen next. She only cared about the tiny life that was slipping away. Morning Star worked with quiet efficiency. Herbs crushed and mixed. Cool cloths applied to burning skin. Soft words in a language Ruth didn't understand. Will she live? Ruth couldn't keep the question inside anymore. Please, tell me she'll live. Morning Star looked at her for a long moment. You are the counting woman. Ruth froze. What? You count. I can see it in your eyes. Always counting. Always measuring. Trying to control what cannot be controlled. I don't. Your daughter will live. Morning Star turned back to Grace. But you must stop counting her breaths. She feels your fear. It makes her weaker. Ruth wanted to argue. Wanted to explain that counting was the only thing that had kept her sane. But the words died in her throat. How do I stop? You don't stop counting. Morning Star's voice softened. You count different things, not the breaths she might lose, the ones she takes, not the ways she might die, the ways she lives. Ruth looked down at Mercy sleeping peacefully despite the chaos, at Grace still feverish but breathing, at her own hands scarred and work-worn but whole. I don't know how to do that, she whispered. Then learn. Morning Star pressed a small bundle of herbs into Ruth's palm. Brew this into tea. Give it to her twice a day until the fever breaks. And Ruth Ellen Calloway. Ruth startled at her full name. How did you? Eli talks about you. Ruth's gaze shot to Eli, who was standing in the corner looking anywhere but at her. He talks about a woman with fire in her eyes and chains on her wrists. Morning Star continued. A woman who gave birth to 2 daughters in the back of a wagon and didn't scream once. A woman worth saving. I'm not. You are. Morning Star's voice left no room for argument. Now go. Your daughter needs rest. So do you. They left as the sun began to set. Grace was sleeping peacefully now, her fever already beginning to break. Ruth held both babies close and watched Eli drive in silence. You talked to her about me. It wasn't a question. Eli nodded. Morning Star and I trade sometimes. Horses for herbs. I told her I might be bringing someone who needed help. Before you even bought me. After I saw you at the auction. Before I bid. He glanced back at her. I told you. Actions speak louder than words. I was already planning to help you before I knew your name. Ruth didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. They made camp that night in a sheltered hollow. Eli built a fire while Ruth fed the babies, watching him work with the efficiency of long practice. You should sleep, he said when the fire was burning steady. I'll keep watch. Watch for what? Wolves, weather. He hesitated. Other things. What other things? Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, The man who owned you before. What's his name? Ruth's blood went cold. Why? Because men like that don't let go easy. And I want to know what we might be facing. We. There it was again. Like her problems were his problems. Like they were in this together. Whitmore, Ruth said quietly. Colonel Marcus Whitmore. She saw Eli's jaw tighten. Confederate? During the war. Plantation owner before that. Lost most of his land when the Union won. Moved west. Started over with cattle. And people. And people. Ruth's voice went flat. He had 12 of us when I left. Probably more now. How long were you with him? 6 years. Ruth looked down at her sleeping daughters. He's the one who took my first baby, sold her to pay a gambling debt. The silence that followed was heavy, thick. I'm sorry. Eli's voice was rough. That shouldn't have happened. None of it should have happened. But it did. Yeah, it did. He met her eyes across the fire. And now we make sure it never happens again. How he's got money, power, men with guns who do what he says. I've got a ranch in the middle of nowhere with clear sight lines and a Winchester rifle. Eli's expression hardened. And I've got something he doesn't. What? Something worth fighting for. Ruth wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to push for more information, more reassurance, more proof that he could keep her safe. But Grace stirred against her chest, and Mercy made a soft sound, and Ruth realized that for the first time in years, she wasn't counting threats. She was counting blessings. 2 babies. Alive. Safe. Hers. 1 man. Steady. Kind. Present. 1 fire. Warm. Bright. Maybe that was enough. Maybe for tonight that was everything. They reached Eli's ranch on the 6th day. Ruth had been expecting something small. A shack maybe. A lean-to with a couple of horses. What she found was different. The cabin was solid, well-built, surrounded by fenced pastures where horses grazed despite the cold. There was a barn, a chicken coop, a root cellar. Evidence of years of work, years of care, years of building something that would last. This is yours. Ruth couldn't keep the surprise out of her voice. Built most of it myself. Took 5 years. Eli pulled the wagon to a stop. It's not much, but it's home. Not much. Ruth had lived in slave quarters smaller than the chicken coop. She'd slept on dirt floors with 10 other women. She'd eaten scraps from tables and been grateful for them. This wasn't not much. This was everything. Come on. Eli helped her down from the wagon. Let's get you inside. Fire's probably out, but I can get it going quick. Ruth followed him to the cabin door. He pushed it open and stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter first. She didn't move. What's wrong? Eli asked. You're not going in first. It's going to be your home too. Seems right you should go first. My home. Ruth had never had a home. Not since she was 14. The words felt foreign, impossible, but she stepped through the door anyway. The cabin was cold as Eli had predicted, but it was clean, orderly. A bed in one corner, a wood stove, a table with 2 chairs. Simple, but functional. The kind of place where someone actually lived, not just survived. Bed's yours, Eli said, already moving to the stove. I'll sleep by the fire. That's your bed. Was my bed. Now it's yours. I can't take... Ruth. He turned to face her, and his expression was patient but immovable. You just gave birth 6 days ago. You've got 2 babies who need you strong and healthy. The bed's yours. That's not negotiable. Ruth wanted to argue. She'd spent 10 years arguing against kindness because kindness always had a price, always had conditions, always came with strings that would eventually strangle her. But the babies were fussing. Her body ached, and the bed looked softer than anything she'd slept on in years. Fine. She moved toward it. But we're not done talking about this. Didn't figure we were. Eli got the fire going while Ruth settled the twins onto the bed. They'd need a proper cradle soon. 2 cradles probably. But for now they fit perfectly in the space between the pillows. You hungry? Eli asked. Yes. Ruth hadn't realized how hungry until he asked. I'm starving. There's bread in the cupboard, dried meat too. Tomorrow I'll go hunting, get us something fresh. Us. Tomorrow. He kept talking like there would be a tomorrow, like the future was something they could count on. Ruth ate bread and dried meat and drank water from a clean cup. She fed the babies and changed them using the clothes Eli had bought. She lay down on the bed and felt the softness of the mattress against her exhausted body. And she didn't sleep. She lay there in the darkness, listening to Eli's breathing by the fire, listening to her daughter's small sounds, listening to the wind outside, waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're still awake. Eli's voice came from across the room. How do you know? Your breathing's different when you sleep. Slower. Deeper. Ruth turned her head toward his voice, though she couldn't see him in the darkness. You've been listening to my breathing. Hard not to. We've been traveling together for 6 days. That's... Ruth didn't know what that was. Creepy comforting. Both. Can't sleep, Eli asked. Can't stop waiting. For what? For you to show me who you really are. The silence stretched long. Then Eli said, And who do you think I really am? I don't know. That's the problem. Every man I've ever known has been... She trailed off. A monster. Some of them. Others were just weak. Did what they were told. Looked the other way. Ruth's voice hardened. That's almost worse sometimes. The ones who knew it was wrong and did nothing. I'm not going to do nothing. Words. Just words. Yeah. Eli shifted. I know. That's why I'm not going to try to convince you. I'm just going to keep doing what I've been doing, day after day, until you believe it or you don't. And if I never believe it, then you never believe it. But you'll still be safe here. You'll still have a roof over your head and food in your belly and a place for those babies to grow up free. Ruth's throat tightened. Why does it matter so much to you? You don't know me. I know enough. You don't know anything. You don't know what they made me do, what I did to survive, the person I had to become just to wake up each morning. You're right. I don't. Eli's voice was gentle. And you don't have to tell me. Not unless you want to. But Ruth, what? Whatever you did, whatever they made you do, you're still here. You're still fighting. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. Ruth closed her eyes and felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She hadn't cried this much in years. Hadn't allowed herself to cry. Tears were weakness, and weakness got you hurt. But here in the darkness, with her daughters sleeping beside her, and a stranger's kindness warming the room, she let the tears fall. She fell asleep still crying. And for the first time in 10 years, she didn't dream of chains. The first week passed in a blur of adjustment. Ruth learned the rhythms of the ranch. When Eli woke before dawn, when he fed the horses, when he checked the fence lines, when he came back for meals. She learned that he hummed while he worked tuneless melodies that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside, that he talked to the horses like they could understand him, that he left the cabin door unlocked no matter what. Why? Ruth asked on the third day. Why don't you lock it? Why would I? To keep people out, to keep me in. Eli stopped what he was doing, which was mending a bridle, and looked at her, really looked at her. If I locked that door, would you stay? Ruth considered the question. I don't know. Exactly. He went back to his work. If you're staying because you can't leave, that's not staying. That's captivity. I've got no interest in keeping captives. Then why? The door stays unlocked because I want you to know you can leave whenever you want. If you stay, I want it to be because you chose to, not because I forced you. Ruth didn't know how to respond. Choice had been taken from her so long ago that she'd forgotten what it felt like. What if I leave tomorrow? Then you leave tomorrow. I'll give you supplies, money, whatever you need. Help you get wherever you're going. You wouldn't try to stop me? No. Even though you paid $200 for me. Eli set down the bridle. Ruth, I didn't buy you. I bought your freedom. There's a difference. Those papers say you own me. Papers say a lot of things. He stood and crossed to where she sat. In the eyes of the law, maybe I own you. But in this cabin, in this life, you own yourself. Those papers are just insurance. Insurance against what? Against anyone who might try to take you back. Ruth's breath caught. Whitmore. He was talking about Whitmore. Has anyone come looking? Not yet, but they will. Eli's expression was grim. Men like Whitmore don't give up what they consider theirs. He'll send someone eventually. And when he does, I'll handle it. How? Eli was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You ever shot a gun?" "No." "Then we start tomorrow." Ruth stared at him. "You're going to teach me to shoot?" "I'm going to teach you to defend yourself. There's a difference." "Why?" "Because I won't always be here. And you need to be able to protect yourself and those babies whether I'm around or not." Ruth felt something shift inside her, something she hadn't felt in years. Power, the faintest whisper of it. "Okay," she said. "Tomorrow." The shooting lessons started the next morning. Ruth discovered she had a natural eye. Years of counting, of measuring, of calculating distances and angles had given her an instinct for where the bullet would go. "You're good at this," Eli said after she hit 6 targets in a row. "Real good." "I'm good at things that help me survive." "This is different." "How?" "Survival is about not dying." Eli reloaded the rifle and handed it back to her. "This is about living, about choosing to fight instead of just endure." Ruth aimed at the next target. Breathed in, breathed out. Fired. Dead center. "You feel that?" Eli asked. "Feel what?" "That thing in your chest. That sense that you could handle whatever comes next." Ruth lowered the rifle. She did feel it. A small flame where fear usually lived. "I feel it," she admitted. "Good. Hold on to that feeling. That's what freedom feels like." Freedom. Ruth turned the word over in her mind like a stone she'd never seen before. "I don't know what to do with freedom," she said quietly. "I've never had it." Neither did I for a long time. During the war, I followed orders, did what I was told, watched men die because someone with more authority than sense decided they should. What changed? The war ended. I came home. Eli's voice went distant. Found out Lydia was dead. My son was dead. Everything I'd been fighting for was gone. What did you do? Came out here, built this place, tried to figure out who I was when nobody was telling me who to be. Ruth looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something she recognized. Grief, loss, the slow, painful process of rebuilding from nothing. "Did you figure it out?" she asked. "Who you are? Still working on it." Eli met her eyes. "But I know one thing. I'm not the man who follows orders anymore. I'm the man who gives shelter to women who need it and teaches them to shoot and hopes that's enough to make up for all the things I didn't do when I should have." "It's enough," Ruth heard herself say. "What you're doing. It's enough." Eli looked surprised. Then something softened in his expression. "Thank you." They stood there for a moment, the rifle between them, the cold wind cutting across the open ground. Then Mercy started crying in the cabin, and the moment broke. "I should go." Eli took the rifle. "I'll clean up here." Ruth hurried back to the cabin, her heart beating in a rhythm she didn't recognize. It wasn't fear. It wasn't suspicion. It was something else entirely. The second week brought the first real test. Ruth was feeding Grace by the fire when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Her whole body went rigid, the old terror flooding back. "Eli!" Her voice came out strangled. "Someone's coming!" He was already moving, grabbing the rifle from above the door. "Stay inside. Don't come out unless I call you." Ruth clutched her daughters and retreated to the far corner of the cabin. She could hear voices outside muffled by the walls. "Afternoon?" A woman's voice, sharp and cold. "You must be the one who bought that woman at the auction." "Afternoon, Sadie." Eli's voice was carefully neutral. "Long way from town." "Long way to come and find out my brother-in-law's lost his mind." Ruth's heart stuttered. Brother-in-law. This was Lydia's sister. She needed help. I helped. "Help?" Sadie's laugh was bitter. "You paid $200 for a pregnant slave and brought her back to live in my sister's house. That's not help. That's foolishness." "It's my house, Sadie. My money. My choice." "And what about her choice?" What about Lydia? You think she'd want you replacing her with some... Don't. Eli's voice went hard. Don't finish that sentence. Eli, Lydia's been dead 5 years. 5 years I've been alone in this cabin talking to horses because there's nobody else. 5 years of waking up and reaching for someone who isn't there. Ruth pressed her hand over her mouth, listening. I'm not replacing her. Eli continued, his voice raw. Nobody could replace her. But I'm tired of being alone, Sadie. And I'm tired of pretending that helping someone survive is something to be ashamed of. Silence stretched long, then Sadie's voice quieter now. People in town are talking. Let them talk. They're saying you've gone soft, saying you're keeping a woman against her will. Then they're wrong. She's free to leave whenever she wants. Doors unlocked. And if she doesn't leave, then she doesn't leave. Eli's voice softened. Sadie, I know you loved your sister. I loved her too. But she's gone, and I'm still here, and I've got to find a way to keep living. Another long pause. Can I meet her? Sadie's voice had changed. Still sharp, but something underneath it had cracked. That's her choice, not mine. Ruth heard footsteps approaching the cabin. She straightened, arranging the babies in her arms, trying to look like something other than a terrified woman hiding in a corner. The door opened. Sadie Mae Brooks was exactly what Ruth expected, and nothing like it at the same time. Mid-40s gray streaking through dark hair with a face that looked like it hadn't smiled in years. Their eyes met. So, Sadie said, you're her. I'm Ruth. I know who you are. Sadie's gaze dropped to the babies. Twins? Yes, ma'am. Mercy and Grace. Something flickered in Sadie's expression. Pretty names. Thank you. Sadie stepped closer, and Ruth fought the urge to back away. This woman wasn't a threat, not physically. But her judgment was palpable, filling the room like smoke. You love him. The question caught Ruth off guard. What? Eli. Do you love him? Ruth's throat tightened. I barely know him. But you're living in his house, sleeping in his bed. He sleeps by the fire, he insisted. Sadie's eyebrows rose. He gave you his bed. Like I said, he insisted. Another long silence. Sadie looked around the cabin, at the fire, at the babies, at the small signs of life returning to a space that had been empty for too long. My sister loved this cabin, she said finally. Built it with her own hands alongside Eli. Every board, every nail she touched. Ruth didn't know what to say. She would have hated seeing it empty. Sadie's voice cracked. Hated seeing him alone. Ma'am, I'm not trying to replace... I know. Sadie cut her off. I can see that. Whatever you are to him, it's not that. She moved toward the door, then paused. Ruth. Yes. He's a good man. One of the few I've ever known. Sadie's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Don't break him. Then she was gone. Ruth stood frozen, listening to the hoofbeats fade away. Eli appeared in the doorway a moment later. You all right? I think so. Ruth looked at him. She told me not to break you. Sadie says a lot of things. Is she right? Am I going to break you? Eli crossed to the fire and crouched beside it, feeding in more wood. I've already been broken, Ruth. What happened with Lydia, with Thomas, it broke me in ways I didn't know a person could be broken. Then why? Because broken isn't the same as finished. He looked up at her. Broken things can be put back together. Different than before, maybe, but still whole. Ruth felt tears burning her eyes again. This man, this impossible, stubborn, kind man. I don't want to hurt you, she whispered. I know. I don't know how to do any of this. Neither do I. Eli stood. But I figure we can learn together. There it was again. Together. Like they were partners. Like her presence here mattered. Okay, Ruth said. Together. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a vow. But it was a start. That night, Ruth couldn't sleep again. But this time, it wasn't fear keeping her awake. It was something else. Something she couldn't name. She lay in the darkness, listening to her daughters breathe, listening to Eli shift by the fire. Eli. Yeah. Thank you. For what? For the unlocked door. For not being what I expected. For... She trailed off. For everything. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You're welcome, Ruth. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's a new day. Tomorrow. A new day. A new chance to count something other than threats. Ruth closed her eyes, and for the first time since the auction felt something bloom in her chest. Not hope. Not yet. Hope was still too dangerous. But maybe the beginning of something that could become hope, and that for now was enough. 3 weeks changed everything and nothing. Ruth learned to shoot well enough to hit a target at 50 yards. She learned the rhythm of ranch life, the endless chores that kept hands busy and minds quiet. She learned that Eli snored when he slept on his back and talked in his sleep, sometimes fragments of conversations with people long dead. She learned that Grace laughed before Mercy did, but Mercy crawled first. She learned that babies grew faster than seemed possible, that they changed daily, hourly, becoming more themselves with every breath. She learned that trust was like a muscle, weak at first, painful to use but stronger with practice. What she didn't learn was how to stop waiting for Whitmore. You're doing it again. Eli's voice cut through her thoughts. Ruth looked up from the shirt she was mending. Doing what? Counting the windows, checking the door. You've done it 6 times in the last hour. Old habits. Habits that'll drive you crazy if you let them. Eli set down the harness he'd been repairing. Ruth, if he was coming, he'd have come by now. You don't know him. I know men like him. No. Ruth's voice went hard. You don't. You think you do, but you don't. Eli was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Tell me. Ruth's hands stilled on the fabric. She'd avoided this conversation for 3 weeks. Avoided the memories, the details, the truth of what she'd survived. But Eli had been honest with her. Maybe it was time to return the favor. He doesn't just own people, Ruth said slowly. He collects them, like trophies. The more broken you are when he acquires you, the more he enjoys fixing you, making you useful, making you his. And you were broken when he got you. I was 18. My first owner had just died. His son sold off all the workers to pay gambling debts. Ruth's voice went flat. I'd been with that family since I was 14. They weren't kind, but they were predictable. I knew the rules. And Whitmore's rules were different. Whitmore doesn't have rules. He has whims. Ruth looked at Eli. One day you're his favorite. The next day you're in the cellar for a week because you looked at him wrong. Eli's jaw tightened. The cellar. Dark, cold, no food, just enough water to keep you alive. Ruth's hands started moving again, stitching mechanically. I spent 18 days down there once, lost track of time after the first week. Ruth. He likes to remind you that he owns you, every day, every hour, every minute. He wants you to know that you exist because he allows it, that you breathe because he permits it. And you survived 6 years of that. I survived because I learned to disappear, to become nobody, to count the days and the hours and the minutes until I could escape. Ruth's voice cracked. But I never escaped, not until you. Eli crossed the room and crouched in front of her. He didn't touch her, just waited until she met his eyes. He's not going to take you back. You can't promise that. I can promise I'll die before I let it happen. Ruth felt tears burning. That's what I'm afraid of. The sound of hoofbeats stopped them both. Ruth's whole body went rigid. One rider, maybe two, coming fast. Eli grabbed the rifle and moved to the window. Ruth gathered the babies, both awake now and fussing. Stay back, Eli said quietly. Don't let them see you until we know who it is. Ruth retreated to the corner, her heart hammering against her ribs. The hoofbeats stopped. A voice called out, Eli Brooks, got a message for you. Ruth didn't recognize the voice. Young, nervous. Who's asking? Eli called back. Name's Tommy Parker. I work at the telegraph office in town. Got an urgent message, paid delivery. Eli glanced at Ruth, then moved to the door. He opened it slowly, rifle ready. Ruth couldn't see the rider from her position, but she could hear the conversation. Telegram came in this morning. Man paid extra to have it delivered same day. What man? Didn't give a name. Message came from San Antonio. San Antonio. Ruth's blood turned to ice. She heard paper rustling, then silence. Thank you. Eli's voice was carefully neutral. You can go. Sir, the sender said there'd be a reply. There won't be. Go. Hoofbeats retreating. The door closing. Eli turned and Ruth saw his face. Whatever was in that message, it wasn't good. What does it say? He crossed to her and held out the paper. Ruth took it with trembling hands. The message was short. 7 words. Coming for what's mine. Expect me. No signature. None needed. He found us. Ruth's voice came out strangled. He found us. Ruth. I have to go. She was already moving, gathering the babies, looking for something to carry them in. I have to leave before he gets here. If I'm gone, maybe he'll leave you alone. Ruth, stop. You don't understand. He'll kill you. He'll burn this place to the ground. He'll... Ruth. Eli's hands closed over her shoulders, firm but gentle. Stop. She stopped. Not because she wanted to, but because her body wouldn't move anymore. I'm not letting you run, Eli said quietly. You can't stop me. I'm not going to stop you. I'm asking you to stay. Why? So he can find us both, so he can kill you while I watch, so we can fight him together. Ruth stared at him. Together. You've been running for 10 years, running and hiding and surviving. But you're not alone anymore. Eli's gray eyes held hers. Stay. Fight. Let me help you end this. And if we lose, then we lose together. But at least we'll have fought. Ruth looked down at the telegram in her hand. 7 words. 10 years of fear compressed into 7 words. How long do we have? San Antonio to here. 4 days if he pushes hard, maybe 5. 4 days. Ruth had survived on less. What's the plan? Something shifted in Eli's expression. Relief maybe, or determination. First we get word to Sheriff Crawford. He's a good man, owes me a favor. If this goes sideways, I want the law on our side. And if the law sides with Whitmore, then we handle it ourselves. Eli moved to the cabinet and pulled out a second rifle. You've been practicing. Time to see how good you really are. Ruth took the rifle. It felt different in her hands now. Not just a tool for practice, a weapon for survival. What else? I'll ride to town tomorrow. Send that message to Crawford, pick up supplies. You stay here with the babies. No. Eli blinked. No. I'm not sitting here waiting while you ride into danger. If something happens to you, I need to know. Ruth, if you come with me, people will see you. Word will spread. Word's already spreading. That telegram didn't come from nowhere. Ruth's chin lifted. I'm done hiding. I've been hiding for 10 years, and look where it got me, running from my own shadow. This isn't about hiding. It's about strategy. Strategy says I should know what we're facing. Strategy says I should be there when you talk to Crawford, so I can tell him exactly what Whitmore's capable of. Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. You're stubborn as hell, you know that. I've been called worse. I reckon you have. He nodded slowly. All right, we leave at dawn. But Ruth. Yeah. If things go bad in town, you grab the babies and you run. Don't wait for me, don't look back. You understand? Ruth wanted to argue, but she saw the look in his eyes, the same fierce protectiveness she felt for Mercy and Grace. I understand. They left before sunrise. Ruth had fashioned a carrier that held both babies against her chest, keeping her hands free. The twins were quiet, lulled by the movement of the wagon. The ride to town took 3 hours. 3 hours of silence, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Ruth counted the miles. Old habit. But this time, she wasn't counting toward escape. She was counting toward confrontation. The town appeared slowly buildings, emerging from the winter landscape like teeth from frozen gums. Ruth tensed as they approached, her eyes scanning for threats. Relax. Eli's voice was low. You look guilty. I feel guilty. You haven't done anything wrong. Being alive feels wrong sometimes, when you've spent 10 years being told you shouldn't exist. Eli guided the wagon down the main street. People stopped to stare. A woman with 2 babies traveling with the hermit rancher from the mountain. Ruth could see them calculating, gossiping. Let them talk. Sheriff's office is up ahead, Eli said. Crawford should be there this time of day. They stopped in front of a small building with bars on the windows. Eli helped Ruth down, then led the way inside. Sheriff Crawford was a big man, with tired eyes and hands that looked like they'd seen hard work. He looked up when they entered, surprise flickering across his weathered face. Eli Brooks, been a while? Sheriff. Eli nodded. This is Ruth. She needs your help. Crawford's gaze moved to Ruth, to the babies, back to Eli. Help with what? Ruth stepped forward before Eli could answer. Colonel Marcus Whitmore. You know the name. Crawford's expression changed, hardened. I know it. He owned me for 6 years. Eli bought my freedom at auction 3 weeks ago. Now Whitmore's coming to take me back. You got proof of purchase? Papers are at the ranch, Eli said. Legal and proper. Then legally she's yours. Whitmore's got no claim. Since when does Whitmore care about legal? Ruth's voice was sharp. He'll bring men, guns. He'll burn that ranch to the ground if that's what it takes. Crawford leaned back in his chair. Miss Ruth, I understand your concern, but I can't arrest a man for something he might do. He sent a telegram. Coming for what's mine. Expect me. That's not a might. That's a threat. Could argue it's just words. Ruth felt frustration building. This was what she'd expected. The law protecting the powerful, ignoring the powerless. But Eli stepped in. Crawford, you remember 3 years ago, that mess with the Dawson brothers? Crawford's expression flickered. I remember. I helped you clean that up. Didn't ask for anything in return. I recall. I'm asking now. Eli's voice was steady. When Whitmore comes, I want you there. I want him to see that if he tries to take Ruth by force, he'll be dealing with the law, not just me. Crawford was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, When's he expected? 4 days, maybe less. I'll be there. Crawford stood. But Eli, you need to understand something. If Whitmore comes with legitimate legal papers, papers that supersede your bill of sale, there's nothing I can do. His papers won't be legitimate. You sure about that? Ruth thought about Whitmore, about his connections, his judges, his senators. No, she admitted. I'm not sure about anything. Then we'd better hope for the best and prepare for the worst. Crawford reached for his hat. I'll ride out to your place day after tomorrow. Give me time to look into Whitmore's situation, see what we're really dealing with. Thank you, Sheriff. Don't thank me yet. This could go sideways a dozen different ways. They left the sheriff's office and headed for the general store. Ruth needed supplies, and Eli needed to send word to Morning Star just in case. But they never made it to the store. Ruth Ellen? The voice stopped her cold, old, familiar, impossible. Ruth turned slowly, her heart pounding. A black man stood on the boardwalk, gray-haired and weathered, staring at her like he'd seen a ghost. Ruth Ellen Calloway. That you? Ruth's voice wouldn't come. She knew this man, knew him from another life, another world. Mr. Isaiah, she finally managed. Isaiah Washington crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides. He stopped just short of touching her, his eyes bright with tears. Lord Almighty, I thought you were dead. We all thought you were dead. I almost was. Ruth's voice cracked. I almost was so many times. Your mama. Isaiah's voice broke. She made me promise to look after you. When they took you, I tried to find you. Looked for years. You knew my mother. Knew her girl. I was there when you were born. Your daddy was my best friend before he passed. Ruth felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. All these years she'd thought she was alone. No family, no history, no one who remembered who she'd been before. I thought everyone was gone, she whispered. Almost everyone is. But I'm still here. Isaiah's gaze moved to the babies, to Eli standing protectively nearby. And it looks like you've built something new. I'm trying. Your mama would be proud. Isaiah wiped his eyes. She always said you were a fighter. Said you'd survive anything they threw at you. She was wrong. Ruth's voice hardened. I didn't just survive. I'm going to fight. Fight who? Marcus Whitmore. He's coming for me. Isaiah's expression changed, darkened. Whitmore. I know that name. Everyone knows that name. No, I mean I know him. Worked on his spread 3 years back before I came here. Saw things. Isaiah shook his head. Bad things. Ruth felt something shift inside her. A witness. Someone who'd seen what Whitmore was capable of. Would you testify to that if it came to a trial? Isaiah looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, For your mama's girl, I'd testify to anything. They talked for an hour right there on the boardwalk while the town moved around them. Isaiah told Ruth about her mother's last days, about the people who'd loved her, about the community she'd come from before it was scattered to the winds. Ruth drank in every word, every detail, every piece of the history she'd thought was lost forever. Your mama taught you to read, didn't she? Isaiah asked. Every night, by candlelight. She said reading was the key to everything. She was right. Isaiah leaned closer. You still got that skill. Never lost it, even when they tried to beat it out of me. Good. Isaiah's eyes were sharp. Because I heard something. Rumor from down south. Whitmore's got legal troubles brewing. Something about forged contracts, fraudulent sales. Ruth's heart stuttered. What kind of fraudulent sales? The kind where people get sold who ain't supposed to be sold. Free people. People with papers. Ruth thought about her own history. About the bill of sale that had transferred her from one owner to the next. About the documents she'd never been allowed to see. How would someone prove that? Letters, records, account books. Isaiah shrugged. Problem is, all that evidence is locked up in Whitmore's office. Nobody's ever gotten access. Nobody's ever had a reason to try, Ruth said slowly. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that maybe there's more than one way to fight. Eli, who'd been listening quietly, stepped forward. Ruth, if you're suggesting what I think you're suggesting. I'm not suggesting anything. Yet. Ruth looked at him. But Whitmore's not just coming for me. He's coming because I'm evidence. I know things. Things he doesn't want anyone else to know. What kinds of things? Numbers, names, dates. Ruth's voice hardened. I told you I count everything. I've been counting since I was 14. Every transaction, every sale, Every person who came through his operation. You remember all that. Every detail. Isaiah whistled low. Girl, that information could bring down his whole empire. I know. Ruth looked at both men. And I think he knows it too. That's why he's coming personally. This isn't just about owning me. It's about silencing me. Then we make sure you're not silenced, Eli said. How? Write it down. Everything you remember. Names, dates, numbers. Get it on paper and get copies to people who matter. Who matters? Newspapers, lawyers, politicians who might want to see Whitmore fall. Eli's expression was fierce. You've got a weapon, Ruth. Use it. That night, Ruth sat at the table in Eli's cabin, paper and pen in front of her. The babies were sleeping. Eli was outside checking the perimeter. And Ruth was doing something she'd never done before. Fighting back with the truth. She started writing. Names first. Every person she could remember who'd been bought, sold, or traded through Whitmore's operation. Then dates, transactions, amounts paid. Her hand cramped. Her eyes burned. But she kept writing. 3 hours later, she had 12 pages of testimony. 12 pages of evidence that could destroy the man who'd owned her for 6 years. She was still writing when Eli came inside. You should sleep. Can't. Not until this is finished. Eli crossed to the table and looked at the pages spread across its surface. His expression shifted as he read. Ruth, this is evidence, testimony, ammunition. This is your life, your pain, every terrible thing that happened to you. Yes. Ruth met his eyes. And now it's going to destroy him. You sure you want to do this? Once this gets out, there's no taking it back. I've spent 10 years being afraid of Marcus Whitmore. 10 years letting him own me even when I wasn't in his possession. Ruth's voice hardened. I'm done being afraid. I'm done being owned. If he wants to come for me, he's going to find out exactly what I'm capable of. Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You're the bravest person I've ever met. I'm not brave. I'm angry. Angry is good. Angry keeps you alive. Ruth looked down at the pages of testimony. Her whole history, her whole horror, written in her own hand. What happens now? Now we wait. Eli sat down across from her. And we get ready for whatever comes next. The next 2 days passed in tense preparation. Ruth finished her testimony and made 3 copies. One for Sheriff Crawford, one for Isaiah to keep safe, one hidden in a place only she knew. Eli reinforced the cabin, checked the weapons' planned escape routes. He rode out to tell Morningstar what was happening, came back with herbs and advice. She said to trust yourself, he reported. Said you know more than you think you do. She barely knows me. Morningstar knows everyone. That's her gift. On the 3rd day, Sheriff Crawford arrived as promised. He read Ruth's testimony with growing horror on his face. This is detailed. I have a good memory. You understand what this means? If this is true, if even half of it is true, Whitmore isn't just a slave trader. He's been trafficking free people. That's a federal crime. I know. I'll need to send word to the federal marshal. This is bigger than me. Send word wherever you need to. Just make sure someone's here when Whitmore arrives. Crawford nodded grimly. I'll be here, and I'll bring deputies. That night, Ruth couldn't sleep again. But this time it wasn't fear keeping her awake. It was anticipation. You feel it. Eli's voice came from the darkness. Feel what? That thing in your chest, that sense that everything's about to change. Ruth thought about it. Yeah, I feel it. Scared. Terrified. Me too. Eli shifted by the fire. But Ruth, I've got a good feeling about this. How can you have a good feeling? We don't know what's going to happen. No, we don't, but I know you. I've watched you these past 3 weeks. You're stronger than you think, braver than you know. Whatever Whitmore throws at us, you'll handle it. And if I can't, then I'll be right there beside you, and we'll handle it together. Together. That word again. Ruth was starting to believe it. Dawn came gray and cold on the fourth day. Ruth was feeding Grace when she heard them. Not hoofbeats this time. Wagon wheels, multiple horses, the sound of an army approaching. "He's here!" Eli's voice was calm, but his hand was already on his rifle. Ruth finished feeding Grace, tucked both babies into the makeshift safe spot they'd prepared. Then she grabbed her own rifle and moved to stand beside Eli. "You ready?" he asked. "No." "Good. Neither am I." The door was still unlocked. Ruth thought about that. Even now, with danger approaching, Eli hadn't locked it. Because she was free to leave. She was always free to leave. But she wasn't leaving. Not this time. The wagon appeared first, followed by 6 riders. At the head of the group, mounted on a black horse, sat Colonel Marcus Whitmore. He looked exactly as Ruth remembered. Silver hair, cold eyes, the face of a man who believed he owned the world and everyone in it. "Ruth Ellen." His voice carried across the frozen ground. "You've caused me a great deal of trouble." Ruth stepped onto the porch, rifle held steady. "My name is Ruth Ellen Brooks," she said clearly. "And you don't own me anymore." Whitmore smiled, that terrible patient smile she'd seen 1,000 times before. "We'll see about that." Whitmore dismounted slowly, deliberately, like a man who had all the time in the world. His boots hit the frozen ground with a sound that echoed in Ruth's memory. She'd heard that sound 1,000 times, the sound of him approaching, the sound of punishment coming. But she didn't flinch. Not this time. Ruth Ellen Brooks. Whitmore tested the name like it was something sour. "Is that what you're calling yourself now?" "It's what I am." "What you are is property." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded document. "I have papers that say so." "I have papers too," Eli said, stepping forward. "Legal bill of sale from the Cartwright auction, paid in full." Cartwright. Whitmore's lip curled. "That drunk. He sold what wasn't his to sell. Wasn't yours either, not legally. Everything in that auction house was mine. Every lot, every soul." Whitmore's cold eyes moved to Ruth, including her. Ruth felt the old fear trying to rise, the old instinct to submit, to shrink, to disappear. But she thought about Mercy and Grace inside the cabin, about the testimony she'd written, about everything she'd survived to get here. "Show me," she said. Whitmore blinked. "I beg your pardon. Your papers. Show me. Let me see what you claim gives you the right to own another human being." Something flickered in Whitmore's expression. Surprise, maybe. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone he considered beneath him. "I don't need to show you anything." "Then you don't have anything." Ruth's voice was steady, because a man with legitimate claim doesn't hesitate. A man with legitimate claim doesn't ride 4 days across frozen territory with 6 armed men. A man with legitimate claim goes to court. Courts are slow. I prefer efficiency. You prefer silence. Ruth took a step forward, and she felt Eli tense beside her. You prefer keeping people quiet, people who know things, people who've seen things. Whitmore's mask slipped just for a moment. Ruth saw the calculation behind his eyes, the recognition that she was more dangerous than he'd anticipated. You've gotten bold in your freedom, Ruth Ellen. I've gotten honest. There's a difference. And what honesty is that? The kind that knows names, dates, numbers. Ruth watched his face carefully. The kind that remembers every transaction you ever made, every person you ever sold, every free man and woman you bought with forged papers. The silence that followed was absolute. One of Whitmore's men shifted in his saddle. Another exchanged a glance with his neighbor. Ruth could feel the tension building, could see the calculation happening behind Whitmore's cold eyes. That's a serious accusation, he said finally. It's the truth, and I've got 12 pages of testimony to prove it. Testimony from a slave. Who would believe that? A federal marshal might. A newspaper editor might. A judge who's looking for a reason to investigate your operation might. Whitmore's jaw tightened. Where is this testimony? Somewhere you'll never find it. Multiple copies. Multiple locations. Ruth smiled, and it felt strange on her face, felt powerful. You came here to silence me, Colonel. But I've already spoken. The question now is what happens next. What happens next is you come with me. Whitmore's voice went hard. Willingly or not, your choice. No. The word came from Eli, quiet but unmistakable. Whitmore turned his attention to the rancher for the first time. This doesn't concern you, Mr. Brooks. She's on my land, under my protection. That makes it my concern. Your protection. Whitmore laughed softly. 1 man against 6. Those aren't good odds. I've faced worse. In the war, perhaps. But this isn't war, Mr. Brooks. This is business. Buying and selling people isn't business. It's evil. Something shifted in Whitmore's expression, the mask of civility cracking. You don't know anything about evil. I know it when I see it. The standoff stretched tension building like pressure before a storm. Ruth could feel the violence waiting to happen, could see it in the way Whitmore's men had positioned themselves. Then hoofbeats, coming from the east. Everyone turned. Ruth's heart stuttered as she counted the approaching riders. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sheriff Crawford rode at the front, badge glinting in the weak winter light. Behind him came 3 deputies, all armed, all serious. Morning, Colonel Whitmore. Crawford pulled his horse to a stop. Heard you might be visiting these parts. Whitmore's expression flickered. Annoyance. Calculation. Sheriff Crawford, I wasn't aware this was your jurisdiction. Everything within 50 miles of my office is my jurisdiction, and I got concerns about why a man like you would ride all this way with armed men. Personal business. Personal business that involves threatening a woman on her own property. Her property. Whitmore's laugh was sharp. She's property, my property. Crawford dismounted slowly, deliberately. See, that's where we got a problem. I've seen Mr. Brooks' bill of sale, legal and proper. Whatever claim you think you have, it doesn't supersede a legitimate purchase. The purchase wasn't legitimate. The seller had no authority. Then take it to court. Crawford's voice went hard. File a claim. Get a judge to rule. But until you do that, woman is Ruth Ellen Brooks, legally married to Eli Brooks, and you've got no right to be here. Ruth's breath caught. Married. She looked at Eli. He wasn't looking at her. His eyes were fixed on Whitmore, his expression unreadable. I wasn't aware of any marriage, Whitmore said slowly. Happened 3 days ago. I performed the ceremony myself. Crawford pulled a document from his coat. Certificate right here. Signed, witnessed, legal. Ruth's mind was racing. 3 days ago. When Eli had ridden to town alone, when she'd thought he was just sending messages and buying supplies, he'd married her. Without asking. Without telling her. She should be furious. Should feel manipulated, controlled, owned all over again. But all she felt was something warm blooming in her chest. Something that felt like protection, like love. Whitmore's mask was cracking now, rage bleeding through. This is a trick. No trick, just the law. Crawford's voice was steady. Now I'm going to have to ask you and your men to leave. This is private property and you're not welcome here. I have rights. You have the right to file a legal claim in a court of law. That's all you have. Crawford's hand moved to rest on his gun. Don't make me ask twice. The moment stretched. Ruth could see Whitmore calculating, weighing his options. 6 men against 4 lawmen and a rancher. The odds were close enough to fight. But Whitmore hadn't survived this long by being stupid. This isn't over, he said finally. I reckon it is. Crawford nodded toward the road. Safe travels, Colonel. Whitmore mounted his horse, his movements stiff with contained fury. He looked at Ruth one last time, and she saw it in his eyes. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I'll be seeing you again, Ruth Ellen. I'll be waiting. The riders turned and headed back the way they'd come. Ruth watched until they disappeared over the ridge, her rifle still held ready. Only then did she turn to Eli. Married. He finally met her eyes. I can explain. You'd better. Crawford cleared his throat. I'll give you two some privacy. Deputies and I'll keep watch, make sure Whitmore doesn't circle back. He moved away, and Ruth and Eli were left facing each other in the cold morning light. Ruth. You married me without asking. I married you to protect you. Crawford said a marriage certificate would complicate Whitmore's claim, make it harder for him to take you back. So it was strategy. It was... Eli stopped, took a breath. It was the right thing to do, the smart thing to do. But you didn't ask me. No, I didn't. Ruth felt the anger building. All her life men had made decisions about her, bought her, sold her, used her, controlled her. And now this man she'd started to trust, had done the same thing. I thought you were different. I am different. You made a decision about my life without consulting me. That's what they did. That's what they all did. Ruth. Eli's voice cracked. I'm sorry. I was trying to protect you. I don't need you to protect me. I need you to respect me. The words hung in the air between them. Ruth could see the pain in Eli's face, the regret. Part of her wanted to comfort him. Part of her wanted to scream. You're right, Eli said finally. I should have asked. I should have told you what I was planning and let you decide. That's what I've been saying all along, and then I went and did exactly what I said I wouldn't do. Yes, you did. I can get it annulled, if that's what you want. Crawford can file the papers, and in a few weeks it'll be like it never happened. Ruth looked at him. This man who had bought her freedom and taught her to shoot and held her daughters while she slept. This man who had faced down Whitmore without flinching and had been willing to die to protect her. This man who had just admitted he was wrong. Is that what you want? She asked quietly. An annulment. Eli was silent for a long moment. Then he said no. Then why offer? Because it's your choice. It should have been your choice from the beginning. Ruth thought about everything that had happened since that night at the auction. The fear, the hope, the slow, painful process of learning to trust again. What if I don't want an annulment either? Eli's expression shifted. Hope flickered in his gray eyes. Then we stay married. That's simple. Nothing about this is simple. He took a step closer. Ruth, I know I did this wrong. I know I took something that should have been yours to give. But if you'll let me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. Ruth felt tears burning. This impossible man, this stubborn, kind, deeply flawed man who kept choosing her even when she didn't choose herself. I need time, she said, to think about this, to figure out how I feel. Take all the time you need. And no more decisions without me. No more decisions without you. Ruth nodded slowly. Then we'll see. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't acceptance. But it was a start. The next few days passed in tense waiting. Crawford left 2 deputies stationed near the ranch just in case. Ruth spent her time caring for the babies, writing more testimony, and trying to sort through the tangle of emotions in her chest. She was angry at Eli. That hadn't changed. But underneath the anger was something else. Something that felt like understanding. He'd made a mistake. A big one. But he'd made it trying to protect her. And when she'd confronted him, he'd admitted he was wrong. Had offered to undo it. That was more than anyone had ever done for her. On the 3rd day after Whitmore's visit, Sadie Mae arrived. Ruth saw her coming up the road and felt her stomach tighten. The last time they'd spoken, Sadie had warned her not to break Eli. Now Ruth had discovered that Eli had married her in secret, and she wasn't sure what kind of reception she'd get. But Sadie surprised her. "Heard what happened," she said, dismounting and tying her horse to the post. "Heard my brother-in-law did something stupid." "He told you." "Sent word yesterday. Asked me to come." Sadie's sharp eyes studied Ruth's face. "He wanted me to talk to you." "About what?" "About him. About why he did what he did." Ruth crossed her arms. "He already explained." "He explained the logic, the strategy, the smart move." Sadie stepped closer. "Did he explain the fear?" "What fear?" "The fear of losing someone again." Sadie's voice softened. "When Lydia died, something in Eli broke. Not just grief. Something deeper. He became convinced that everyone he cared about would be taken from him." Ruth thought about what Eli had told her, about his wife, his son, his sister who'd never been found. He's lost a lot of people. Too many. And somewhere along the way he learned that the only way to protect the people he loves is to act before they can be taken. Sadie sighed. "It's wrong. I know it's wrong. He knows it's wrong. But fear doesn't care about right and wrong. That doesn't excuse what he did." "No, it doesn't. But maybe it helps explain it." Sadie looked at her with something that might have been respect. "He told me you confronted him. Told him exactly why what he did was wrong. Someone had to. Not someone. You." Sadie's expression changed. "Ruth, in 5 years of widowhood, I've never seen Eli admit he was wrong about anything. Not once. The fact that he did to you means something." Ruth didn't know what to say. "He loves you," Sadie continued. "I don't think he even knows it yet, but I can see it. The way he talks about you. The way he watches you when you're not looking. We barely know each other. That's what I thought about him and Lydia. They met in April and were married by June." Sadie smiled a real smile. "Some things don't need time. They just need courage." That night Ruth couldn't sleep again. She lay in bed listening to Mercy and Grace breathe, thinking about everything Sadie had said. Eli loved her. Sadie was sure of it. And Ruth. What did Ruth feel she'd spent 10 years learning not to feel? Learning that emotions were weapons others used against you. Learning that caring about someone only gave them power to hurt you. But Eli had never used her feelings against her. He'd been patient when she was scared, kind when she was harsh, steady when she was falling apart. He'd made a mistake, a big one. But he'd also saved her life. Given her freedom. Taught her to fight. He'd given her back herself. "Ruth." Eli's voice came from the darkness. "You awake?" "Yeah." "Can we talk?" Ruth sat up slowly. "Yeah." Eli moved to sit at the foot of the bed, keeping his distance, even now respecting her space. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what you said, about respect. And you were right, about everything." His voice was rough. "I've spent 5 years alone making decisions by myself, for myself. I forgot what it means to share a life with someone. It means asking first. It means treating you like a partner, not like someone who needs protecting." He was quiet for a moment. "Ruth, I don't know how to do this. How to be with someone again. I'm going to make mistakes, probably a lot of them. I know. But I want to try, if you'll let me." He looked at her in the darkness. "I want to learn how to love you right." Love. There it was. The word neither of them had spoken out loud. "You love me. I think I started loving you the moment you looked at Whitmore and said, 'My name is Ruth Ellen Brooks.'" Eli's voice cracked. "You were so brave, so fierce, standing there with nothing but a rifle and your own 2 feet, and you weren't afraid. I was terrified. But you didn't let it stop you. That's what courage is. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. Ruth, I know I don't deserve you. I know I've made mistakes that might take years to make up for. But if you'll give me the chance, I'll spend the rest of my life trying. Ruth felt tears sliding down her cheeks. This man. This impossible, stubborn, beautiful man. I don't know how to love anyone, she whispered. I don't know how to trust. I don't know how to do any of this. Neither do I. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. But I figure we can learn together. Together. That word again. The word that kept saving her. Okay, Ruth said. Together. Does that mean you're staying? I was always staying. I just needed you to understand why I was angry. Do you forgive me? Ruth considered the question. Forgiveness was complicated. It wasn't something you gave once and forgot about. It was something you chose over and over every day. I'm choosing to, she said. Every day I'll choose to forgive you. And every day you'll show me why that choice was right. Eli's hand tightened on hers. That sounds fair. It's the only way I know how to do this. Then that's how we'll do it. They sat there in the darkness, hands intertwined, and Ruth felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not safety. Safety was an illusion. But peace was something different. Peace was knowing that whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. Ruth? Yeah. I love you. She could barely get the words out. I love you too. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't a perfect ending. It was two broken people choosing to be broken together. And that Ruth realized was better than any fairy tale could ever be. Morning came soft and gray. Ruth woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Mercy babbling to herself in the cradle Eli had built. Grace was still sleeping, her tiny fist curled around a strand of blanket. Ruth lay there for a moment, letting the peace wash over her. Then Eli's voice cut through the quiet. Ruth, you need to come outside. Something in his tone made her move fast. She was on her feet and through the door before she could think. Outside, Sheriff Crawford was dismounting from his horse. His expression was grim. What happened? Ruth asked. Got word this morning. Whitmore's been arrested. Ruth's heart stuttered. Arrested? Federal marshals picked him up 2 days ago. Seems someone sent a very detailed testimony to the Attorney General's office in Washington. Names, dates, numbers. Crawford looked at her. Ring any bells? Ruth felt the world shift beneath her feet. Her testimony. The copies she'd made. The one she'd given to Isaiah. Isaiah, she breathed. Smart man, that Isaiah Washington. Knew exactly who to send it to, how to make sure it got into the right hands. Crawford allowed himself a small smile. Whitmore's facing federal charges. Trafficking free persons. Fraud. A whole list of things that'll keep him locked up for a very long time. It's over. Ruth's voice cracked. Really over as anything ever is. There'll be a trial. You might have to testify, but Ruth... Crawford stepped closer. You did this. Your testimony. Your courage. You brought down a man who's been hurting people for decades. Ruth felt tears streaming down her face. 10 years of fear. 10 years of running. 10 years of counting the days until Whitmore would find her. And now it was over. Eli was beside her, his arm around her shoulders. Solid, steady, present. You did it, he said quietly. You ended it. We ended it. Ruth turned to look at him. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Yes, you could have. You were always strong enough. Maybe. But I didn't have to be alone. Ruth reached up and touched his face. That's what you gave me. Not freedom. I had to take that for myself. You gave me someone to fight beside. Eli pulled her close, and Ruth let herself be held. For the first time in her life, she wasn't counting the seconds until something terrible happened. She was just being, existing, living, and it felt like everything. The trial came 3 months later. Ruth testified for 2 days, told the court everything she remembered, everything she'd seen, everything she'd survived. It was the hardest thing she'd ever done, harder than the auction, harder than giving birth in chains. But she did it. When it was over, when Whitmore was convicted on every count and sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, Ruth walked out of the courthouse and into the spring sunshine. Eli was waiting for her. So was Sadie. So was Isaiah. So was Morning Star, who had traveled 3 days to be there. Her family, not by blood, by choice. "How do you feel?" Eli asked. Ruth thought about the question. She felt exhausted, wrung out, empty. But underneath all of that, she felt something else. "Free," she said. "I feel free." And she meant it. The ride home took 4 days. Ruth spent most of it holding Mercy and Grace, who had grown so much in the months since their birth. They were sitting up now, laughing, reaching for things, becoming themselves. "What do you want to do now?" Eli asked on the second day. Now that it's really over, Ruth had been thinking about this. "I want to teach. Teach. Reading. Writing. The things my mother taught me." Ruth looked at him. "There are women out there like me. Women who were never allowed to learn. I want to help them." Eli was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. "We could build a schoolhouse. On the property. Make it a place where anyone who wants to learn can come." "You'd do that?" "I'd do anything for you. Haven't you figured that out by now?" Ruth leaned against his shoulder, watching the landscape roll by. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." It wasn't the end of their story. Ruth knew that. There would be hard days ahead. Days when the past crept back and the fear returned. Days when she'd wonder if she deserved this happiness. But there would also be good days. Days filled with laughter and learning and love. Days when she'd look at her daughters and see the future instead of the past. Days when she'd remember that she wasn't property anymore. She was Ruth Ellen Brooks, wife, mother, teacher, survivor. And no one would ever take that away from her again. The schoolhouse took 3 months to build. Ruth watched it rise from the ground, board by board, nail by nail. Eli worked on it every day, and when he couldn't work, Isaiah came. When Isaiah couldn't come, Morning Star's brother brought men from the reservation. When they couldn't come, Sadie organized women from town to help. A community building something together. Ruth had never seen anything like it. "You're staring again," Eli said, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the cool spring air. "I'm allowed. It's my schoolhouse. Our schoolhouse." Ruth smiled. She did that a lot now, smiling. It still felt strange sometimes, like a muscle she was relearning how to use. "Mama!" Mercy's voice cut through the air. The twins were 18 months old now, walking, talking, getting into everything they could reach. "What is it, baby girl? Grace ate dirt." Ruth sighed and went to rescue her daughter from her own curiosity. Grace was sitting in the garden patch, mud smeared across her face, looking extremely pleased with herself. "You can't eat dirt, sweetheart." "Tastes good," Grace said solemnly. Eli laughed, actually laughed, a sound Ruth still wasn't used to hearing from him. 5 years of silence, and now he laughed almost every day. "She's got your stubbornness," he said. "She's got your appetite." They looked at each other, and something passed between them. Something warm and real and terrifying in its simplicity. Love. Ruth was still learning what that word meant. The schoolhouse opened on a Tuesday in late May. Ruth had expected maybe 5 students, women from town who'd heard about her offer to teach reading for free. Maybe a few children whose families couldn't afford formal education. 23 people showed up. They came from everywhere. Town, the surrounding ranches, the reservation, the mining camps in the hills, old women and young girls and everyone in between. Ruth stood at the front of the room, chalk in her hand, and felt tears burning her eyes. I don't... She had to stop. Start again. I don't have fancy credentials. I learned to read by candlelight from a mother who knew that words were power. And then I spent 10 years being told that women like me didn't deserve that power. The room was silent. 23 pairs of eyes fixed on her. They were wrong. Ruth's voice strengthened. Every one of us deserves to read, to write, to speak our own truth in our own words. That's what this place is for. A woman in the front row raised her hand. Ruth recognized her. Martha from the general store. She'd never spoken directly to Ruth before. Mrs. Brooks? Yes. I'm 62 years old. I've never read a single word in my life. Is it too late for me? Ruth felt her heart crack open. It's never too late. Not ever. Martha smiled. It was a small thing, hesitant, but it was real. Then teach me. Ruth picked up the chalk and turned to the board. She wrote a single letter, large and clear. This is A. This is where we begin. The first month was chaos. Ruth had never taught before. She didn't know how to manage a room full of people at different levels, with different needs, different fears. Some students learned fast. Others struggled with every letter. But she didn't give up. Couldn't give up. These women had trusted her with something precious, and she wasn't about to betray that trust. You're exhausted, Eli said one night. Ruth was slumped at the kitchen table, lesson plans spread in front of her. I'm fine. You're not fine. You've been going nonstop for weeks. They need me. So do I. Eli sat down across from her. So do Mercy and Grace. You can't pour from an empty cup, Ruth. I know that. She trailed off. I spent so long being useless. Being nothing. Now I finally have a chance to do something that matters, and I don't want to waste it. Teaching matters. But so does taking care of yourself. Ruth looked at him. This man who had learned to say hard things gently. Who had learned that caring about someone meant telling them truths they didn't want to hear. One day off, she said finally. Just one. That's all I'm asking. They spent that day by the creek behind the ranch. Just the four of them. Ruth, Eli, and the twins. Mercy and Grace splashed in the shallow water while Eli taught them to skip stones. Ruth watched and felt something settle inside her chest. Peace. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of something worth struggling for. Eli, yeah. Thank you. For what? For reminding me why I'm doing this. Why any of it matters. He came to sit beside her close enough that their shoulders touched. You don't need reminding. You just need rest. Maybe. Definitely. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Ruth, there's something I need to tell you. Her stomach tightened. What? I got a letter yesterday, from a lawyer in Louisiana. Louisiana, where Ruth's first daughter had been sold. What kind of letter? He's been tracking children who were sold illegally, using testimony from Whitmore's trial. Eli took her hand. Ruth, he thinks he found her. Ruth's world stopped. What? Her name is Sarah now. She's 8 years old, living with a family in New Orleans. Ruth couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Her first baby, the one they'd taken from her when she was 3 days old. The one she'd mourned for 6 years, never knowing if she was alive or dead. Is she okay? The lawyer says she's healthy, happy. The family that has her. Eli hesitated. They love her, Ruth. They've raised her as their own. Ruth felt tears streaming down her face. Happy. Her daughter was happy. Alive and healthy and happy. Can I see her? That's complicated. The family doesn't know about her history. They bought her thinking she was an orphan. She was stolen from me. I know. The lawyer knows. But Ruth. Eli squeezed her hand. If you claim her, you'd be tearing her away from the only family she's ever known. Ruth's chest was burning. 6 years she'd dreamed of finding her daughter. 6 years she'd imagined holding her again, raising her, giving her the life she deserved. But Sarah had a life, a family, people who loved her. What do I do? Ruth whispered. I don't know. That's not my choice to make. But you have an opinion. Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I think love isn't always about holding on. Sometimes it's about letting go. Ruth looked at her twins splashing in the water, at this life she'd built from nothing, at this family she'd chosen and been chosen by. I want to write to her, she said finally. Not to the family, to her, for when she's old enough to understand. What would you say? Ruth thought about it. All the things she wanted to tell her daughter, all the years they'd lost, all the love she'd carried in silence. I'd tell her the truth, that I loved her from the moment she was born, that losing her broke something in me that's only now starting to heal, that I hope she has a good life, a happy life, and that if she ever wants to find me, I'll be waiting. That sounds right. Does it? Ruth wiped her eyes. Because it doesn't feel right. It feels like giving up. It's not giving up. It's choosing her happiness over your own. That's what parents do. Ruth leaned into him, letting his warmth surround her. I hate this. I know. I hate that I have to choose between my daughter's happiness and my own. I know. But I'm going to choose her, because that's what love is. Eli pressed his lips to her forehead. That's what love is. They sat there until the sun started to set, watching their daughters play, mourning the one they couldn't hold while loving the ones they could. Ruth wrote the letter that night. It took her 3 hours and 7 drafts. She told Sarah everything. The auction where she'd been sold while pregnant, the night she'd given birth in chains, the 3 days she'd held her daughter before they took her away. She told her about Whitmore, about the trial, about the testimony that had brought him down. She told her about Eli and Mercy and Grace and the schoolhouse and the life she'd built from ashes. And she told her that no matter what happened, no matter where life took her, she would always be Sarah's mother. That some bonds couldn't be broken by distance or time or other families' love. That she would be waiting. Always waiting. Are you sure about this? Eli asked, watching her seal the envelope. No. Ruth's hands were shaking. But I'm doing it anyway. That's courage. That's necessity. She looked at him. Will you mail it for me? I don't think I can. Of course. He took the letter and held her while she cried. And in the morning, he rode to town and sent it on its way. Ruth didn't hear back for 3 months. She threw herself into teaching during that time. Anything to keep her mind off the letter, off Sarah, off the unbearable waiting. Martha learned to read her own name first, then her husband's name, then the names of her children and grandchildren. The day she read a whole sentence out loud, she cried. I never thought... Martha couldn't finish. I never thought I'd be able to do this. You always could. You just needed someone to show you how. The schoolhouse grew. More students came. Ruth trained 2 of her best learners to help teach the newcomers. What had started as one woman with a piece of chalk became something bigger. A movement. A mission. You've changed things, Sadie said one afternoon. She'd taken to visiting the schoolhouse watching Ruth teach. This whole community. You've changed it. I've just taught some people to read. You've taught them they matter. That's different. Ruth thought about that. About all the years she'd been told she didn't matter. About the moment she'd finally started believing she did. Maybe. Not maybe, definitely. Sadie smiled. It was still rare, but it happened more often now. My sister would have loved this place. You think, I know. Lydia always said education was the great equalizer, the thing that could lift anyone up regardless of where they started. Sadie's eyes were bright. "You're living her dream, Ruth. The dream she never got to finish." Ruth felt tears threatening. "I didn't know her." "No, but Eli did, and he loved her enough to build this place in her memory." Sadie looked at the schoolhouse. "You and Lydia, you're connected now. Through him, through this, through the work you're doing." It was a strange thought, being connected to a dead woman, but it didn't feel strange. It felt right. Like Ruth was part of something bigger than herself. A chain of women reaching back through time, each one passing the torch to the next. "Thank you," Ruth said. "For what?" "For accepting me. I know it wasn't easy." Sadie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "It wasn't, but you made it easier. You could have hated me for how I treated you at first. Instead, you just kept being yourself, kept showing up, kept proving me wrong. I didn't have the energy to hate you. I was too busy surviving. That's what made the difference. You weren't trying to prove anything. You were just living. And living well is the best proof there is." The letter came in August. Ruth was teaching when Eli appeared in the doorway, an envelope in his hand. His face told her everything she needed to know. "Class dismissed," Ruth said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "We'll continue tomorrow." The students filed out, some casting curious glances at Eli's expression. Ruth waited until the room was empty before she spoke. "Is it from her?" "The return address says New Orleans." Ruth took the envelope. It felt impossibly heavy, impossibly light. Everything and nothing all at once. "I can't open it." "You can." "What if she hates me? What if she blames me for giving her up?" "Then you'll deal with that. Together." Eli took her hand. "But you won't know until you read it." Ruth broke the seal with trembling fingers. The letter inside was short, written in a child's careful handwriting. "Dear Mother, my mama read me your letter. She cried. My papa cried too. They said they didn't know I had another family. They said they're sorry. I'm not mad at you. My mama explained what happened. She said you were very brave. She said giving me up was the hardest thing you ever did. I have a good life here. My mama and papa love me. I have a dog named Biscuit and a cat named Patches. I go to school and my teacher says I'm smart. But I think about you sometimes. The mother who had me first. The one who loved me enough to let me go. Maybe someday I can come visit. Meet my sisters. See the school you built. Until then, I'll keep your letter under my pillow, so I can always remember that I was loved, from the very beginning." Your daughter Sarah Ruth read the letter 3 times. Then she collapsed into Eli's arms and cried harder than she had since the night she'd given birth. "She doesn't hate me." "No, she doesn't. She wants to visit, someday. Someday." Ruth clutched the letter to her chest. This piece of paper that proved her daughter was alive. That proved she was loved. That proved some bonds really couldn't be broken. "I'm going to write back." "I figured you would." "I'm going to tell her everything. About Mercy and Grace. About the schoolhouse. About you." "Me?" Ruth looked at him through her tears. "You're her stepfather. She should know about you." Something shifted in Eli's expression. Something raw and vulnerable. "I never thought about it that way." "I know, but it's true." Ruth reached up and touched his face. "You're part of this family, Eli. All of it. Even the parts that came before you." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of everything they'd built together. "I love you," he said. "I love you too." The second wedding happened on the anniversary of the first. Not because Eli asked this time, because Ruth did. "Marry me," she said one night. "For real this time, with both of us choosing it." Eli stared at her. "We're already married. Legally, technically, But that first time I didn't get to choose. Ruth took his hands. I want to choose you. Out loud. In front of everyone. Ruth, I know it's silly. I know it doesn't change anything legally. But it would change something for me. She met his eyes. I want to stand in front of our community and say yes. I want to promise myself to you, because I want to, not because I have to. Eli was quiet for so long that Ruth started to worry she'd made a mistake. Then he smiled. That rare full smile she lived for. When? The anniversary of the first wedding. We'll make it a real anniversary. That's in 3 weeks. Then we'd better start planning. The ceremony was simple. Held in the schoolhouse because it seemed right somehow. The place Ruth had built was the place where she'd commit to building something else. Sadie stood as Ruth's witness. Isaiah stood as Eli's. Morning Star blessed the union in her own language words. Ruth didn't understand, but felt in her bones. Mercy and Grace served as flower girls scattering petals with more enthusiasm than accuracy. The twins were 3 now, tall for their age, with their mother's dark hair and their own fierce spirits. Do you, Ruth Ellen Calloway, take this man to be your husband? Ruth looked at Eli. At this man who had bought her freedom and given her back herself. Who had made mistakes and admitted them. Who had loved her through the hardest parts of healing. I do. And do you, Elijah Tanner Brooks, take this woman to be your wife? Eli's gray eyes were bright. I do. Again. Always. The room erupted in cheers. Ruth felt herself being kissed, being held, being celebrated. She felt loved, not just by Eli, by everyone, by the community she'd built, by the family she'd chosen, by herself. That last part had taken the longest. Learning to love herself, to believe she was worthy of love, to accept happiness without waiting for it to be taken away. But she'd learned, day by day, choice by choice. And now here she was, Ruth Ellen Brooks, wife, mother, teacher, free. 5 years passed like water through fingers. The schoolhouse expanded twice. Ruth trained a dozen teachers who went on to start their own schools across the territory. What had begun as one woman with a piece of chalk became a network, a movement, a revolution in miniature. Mercy and Grace grew into fierce, brilliant girls who read voraciously and asked questions Ruth couldn't always answer. They had their mother's determination and their father's patience. They had their own dreams. Sarah visited twice. Once when she was 12 again, when she was 15. Both times Ruth held her and cried and marveled at the young woman her daughter was becoming. You could stay, Ruth said during the second visit. If you wanted, there's room. Sarah smiled. She had Ruth's smile, Ruth realized. The same curve of lips, the same light in her eyes. I know, but my home is in New Orleans, with Mama and Papa and Biscuit the Third. Biscuit the Third. The first 2 didn't make it, old age. Ruth laughed. She did that a lot now. Laughing. It had become as natural as breathing. I'm glad you have a good life, Sarah. I'm glad you do too. Sarah looked around at the ranch, the schoolhouse, the life Ruth had built. You made something beautiful here, Mother. I had help. Everyone needs help. The trick is accepting it. Such wisdom from a 15-year-old. But then Sarah had always been wise, even as a baby, even in the 3 days Ruth had held her before they were torn apart. Will you come back again? Every year if you'll have me. I'll have you, always. They held each other, and Ruth felt something complete. Something that had been broken for years finally whole. Not perfect, never perfect, but whole. Eli got sick in the autumn of the 6th year. It started slowly. A cough that wouldn't go away. Weakness that crept in around the edges. Ruth pretended not to notice at first. Pretended everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine. You need to see a doctor, she said one morning. Eli was sitting by the fire, too tired to help with chores for the first time in their marriage. "I've seen doctors." "See another one." "Ruth." He met her eyes, and she saw it there. The truth he'd been hiding. "How long have you known?" 3 months. 3 months? Ruth's voice cracked. "You've known for 3 months and you didn't tell me." "I didn't want to worry you." "Worry me." She felt rage building. "Eli, we promised. No more secrets. No more decisions without each other." "I know. I'm sorry." Ruth sank down beside him, the anger draining as quickly as it had come. "How bad is it?" "Bad." His voice was quiet. "Doctor says maybe a year, maybe less." A year. 12 months. 365 days. Ruth had counted so many terrible things in her life. She couldn't count this. Couldn't bear to. "We'll fight it," she said. "Ruth. We'll fight it. Together. Like we fight everything." Eli took her hand. His grip was weaker than it used to be, but it was still there. Still present. "Some fights can't be won." "I don't believe that." "I know you don't. That's one of the things I love about you." He smiled, and it was the same smile she'd fallen in love with. "But this time, I need you to prepare. For mercy and grace. For the school. For yourself. I can't prepare to lose you." "You can. You've survived worse." Ruth shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I survived because I had you. I survived because you showed me what living looked like. And now you know. You don't need me to show you anymore." Eli touched her face, wiping away tears with a thumb that trembled slightly. "You're the strongest person I've ever known, Ruth Ellen Brooks. You were strong before me. You'll be strong after." "I don't want after." "Neither do I. But we don't always get what we want." He pulled her close. "We get what we choose to make of what we're given." Ruth held him and cried. And somewhere in the crying, she made a choice. She would not waste the time they had left on grief. She would spend it on love. The last year of Eli's life was the fullest. They traveled to places he'd always wanted to see. Took Mercy and Grace to the ocean, watched their daughters' faces light up at the endless water. Visited Sarah in New Orleans, met her family, saw the life she'd built. They talked about everything, about things they'd never said, memories they'd never shared, dreams they'd never spoken aloud. Ruth wrote it all down, every story, every memory, every piece of Eli she wanted to save for their daughters, for the future, for herself. "You're journaling again," Eli said one night, watching her write by lamplight. "I'm preserving. Preserving what? You, everything you are, everything you've taught me." Ruth looked at him. "I want Mercy and Grace to know their father, really know him, even when you're not here to tell them yourself." Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Read me something." "What?" "Something you've written. About me." Ruth flushed. "It's not finished." "Nothing ever is. Read it anyway." She turned back a few pages, found a passage she'd written the week before. "Eli Brooks is the kind of man who talks to horses because he knows they're listening. The kind who keeps doors unlocked because he believes in choosing. The kind who sees broken things and doesn't try to fix them, just sits with them until they remember how to fix themselves." She paused, throat tight. "Keep going," Eli said softly. "He taught me that love isn't possession. It's partnership. Not control, but collaboration. He taught me that I was worth saving even when I didn't believe it myself. And every day, in 1,000 small ways, he shows me what it means to be free." Silence stretched between them. "Is that really how you see me?" Eli asked. "That's who you are." "I'm not sure I deserve." "You do." Ruth set down the journal and moved to sit beside him. "You deserve every word, every memory, every moment of love I can give you." He kissed her, soft and sweet and achingly tender. "Thank you," he said, "for choosing me. Thank you for letting me choose." Eli died on a Tuesday in late October. Ruth was holding his hand when it happened. Mercy and Grace were there too, grown now 18 years old, ready to face a world their father had helped build. The end was peaceful. A breath, then another, then silence. Ruth sat with him for a long time, after holding his hand, memorizing his face, saying goodbye to the man who had changed everything. She didn't count the minutes. For once, counting didn't matter. When she finally stood, her daughters were waiting. They held her while she cried, and she held them back, and they mourned together, the way family does. The funeral was held at the schoolhouse. Ruth had considered the ranch, the place where they'd built their life together. But the schoolhouse felt right. The place that represented everything they'd created, everything that would continue after he was gone. Half the town came. People Ruth had taught people, Eli had helped people whose lives had been changed by two broken people who'd chosen to be broken together. Ruth spoke last. She stood at the front of the room, the same place where she'd taught so many people to read, and found the words. "Eli Brooks bought my freedom 6 years ago. He paid $200 for a woman with 2 babies in her belly and no hope in her heart." Ruth's voice was steady. "But he didn't just buy me. He chose me. Every single day, he chose to see me as a person when the world saw property. Chose to love me when I couldn't love myself. Chose to build a life with me when I didn't know life was possible." She looked at the crowd, at Mercy and Grace crying quietly, at Sadie, who had become a second mother, at Isaiah, who had become a brother, at Morning Star, who had become a healer in every sense. Her family, chosen and choosing. "I'm going to miss him every day for the rest of my life, but I'm not going to let missing him stop me from living, because that's not what he would have wanted. He would have wanted me to keep teaching, keep fighting, keep choosing." Ruth took a breath. "So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wake up every morning and choose to live, choose to love, choose to be the person he believed I could be." She looked at the empty chair where Eli should have been sitting, at the space that would never be filled. "I love you, Eli Brooks. I'll love you forever. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving that your faith in me was justified." She sat down and the room was silent, except for the sound of people crying. Crying for Eli. Crying for Ruth. Crying for love that ends too soon, but matters anyway. Ruth lived another 32 years. She watched her daughters grow up, get married, have children of their own. She watched Sarah come home for good, bringing her own family to the ranch that had become a sanctuary. She taught hundreds of students, trained dozens of teachers, built a legacy that would outlast her by generations. She never remarried, not because she didn't believe in love, but because she'd had the love of her life. One person chosen and choosing was enough. On her last day, Ruth sat on the porch of the cabin she'd shared with Eli. The same porch where she'd first stood as a frightened woman with 2 babies and no hope. Mercy was there. Grace was there. Sarah was there with her own children. 4 generations of women connected by blood and choice and love. "Mama." Grace's voice was soft. "How do you feel?" Ruth thought about the question. She was 92 years old. Her body was tired. Her work was done. But her heart was full. "I feel grateful," she said, "for all of it. The pain and the healing. The loss and the love. Every single choice that led me here. Even the hard ones. Especially the hard ones." Ruth looked at her daughters, at her granddaughters, at the life she'd built from ashes. "The hard choices taught me who I was. The easy ones just confirmed it." She closed her eyes, feeling the sun on her face, hearing the voices of her family around her. She wasn't counting anymore. Not breaths, not days, not moments. She was just being, existing, living. And when she finally let go, it was peaceful, like exhaling after holding her breath for a very long time. like freedom. The grave marker was simple. Ruth Ellen Brooks, beloved wife, mother, teacher. She counted what mattered. But the real memorial was the schoolhouse, still standing, still teaching, still changing lives. And above the door, carved into the wood by Eli's own hands decades ago, a single word that said everything: choose. Because that was Ruth's legacy. Not the suffering she'd survived, not the injustice she'd overcome, but the choice she'd made every single day to keep living, to keep loving, to keep believing that broken things could be made whole. She'd been born with nothing. She'd been sold like property. She'd been told she was worthless, meaningless, less than human. But she'd chosen to disagree. And in choosing, she'd changed everything. Not just for herself, for her daughters, for her students, for every woman who would ever stand in that schoolhouse and learn that she too had the power to choose. That was the truth Ruth Ellen Brooks had spent her whole life learning. We are not what is done to us. We are not what others say we are. We are not our pain or our past or our chains. We are what we choose to become. And Ruth had chosen to become free.